Folks, it is the final event of the first day of World Building Con. And oh goodness, what a day it has been. We've already had a spectacular keynote from R.A. Salvatore, a horror panel, a politics and power panel, a resources and trade panel. And if you thought it couldn't get any better, well, folks, have I got news for you. Last year's keynote speaker, and may I say, a personal friend of mine, I'm honored to say a personal friend of mine, Tracy Hickman, is joining us for a seminar on creating better characters. Tracy is a New York Times best-selling fantasy and science fiction novelist and a game designer. He wrote the Dragonlance novels with Margaret Weiss. He also wrote role-playing game material while working for TSR and has co-written novels with his wonderful, gorgeous wife, Laura Hickman, and is the author or co-author of over 60 books. Tracy, it is such an honor to have you back on the World Building Con stage. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Janet. Please let me know. I hope my sound is good for you here today. Excellent.
Coming through loud and clear. You've got a spectacular table of busy things behind you.
Yes,
I see
yes,
much
I do.
storytelling in evidence.
There is much storytelling, and much of my life is involved in what you find here in my office. Let's see, over on this side here, I have my autographed Buzz Aldrin photograph because space was so big for me when I was young. And of course, I have my 3D chess set over here. Very important.
Love me some Vulcan chess.
You have to have that here. And here also on the wall is something my wife got me at an auction once, which is a display of pieces of 8 and doubloons and all sort of pirate treasure here.
Amazing.
So yes, and of course over here the NSE protector, very important that I have that model on my desk to inspire me at all times.
I love this. So Tracy, creating better characters is the name of the seminar.
It is, and I'm wearing my writer shirt here today.
Verified. The chat has been admiring your shirt, by the way.
Well, yes, I thought this so that there would be no doubt about which hat I was wearing today. I much loved, of course, the promo piece that we ran at the beginning of this twice because it was so nice. And
you're welcome.
Yes, and I saw myself on one of the screens there. Although as they went through, they talked about world creators and game designers and writers, and I realized that you could put my picture on all of those.
Yes, absolutely.
First of all, it would be really redundant, and secondly, it would look like you're just a little thin on people. So the truth is that there are so many people around the world that admire World Anvil, and there is no bigger fan of World Anvil than I am. I use it not just for like my gaming and so forth, but I use it in my business. I use it in the creation of worlds for our novels. I use it as a resource for novel creation. I also use it as a resource for world building and world creation. In fact, just finished last month building a world for Loot Studios, the miniatures online miniatures company, and building an entire wonderful world for them for their new project that they're releasing this year, Relics Untold. So I'm not just a fan. I use World Anvil every day in my work.
It's so amazing to hear you say that, Tracy. It really is, for Demetrius and me, it's a dream come true. So thank you for sharing.
And yes, you are my dear friends. As we were talking about, we had dinner together at Gen Con last year, and little known fact, but I ordered dessert for dinner that evening just so I could keep both of you at the table a little bit longer.
I did not know that, you sneaky thing. Well, it was such a pleasure. It was a wonderful evening. We had so much fun together.
Well, let's talk about characters, because characters are so important in what we do. And characters are so important not just in story, which is and novels, which is of course absolutely true, or film or television. also very true. Streaming, absolutely true. But also in terms of games and game structure, they're also incredibly important. In fact, there are actually important differences that maybe I'll have a chance to talk with you about when it comes to the differences between characters in novels, characters in film and streaming, and also characters as they apply to games. And they're actually different. How they work is different. A lot of this I learned not only in my role-playing years and designing role-playing games, but also as the director of story design for The Void, where we had to deal with the idea of experiential narrative and open narrative, more particularly the idea that each of us is the hero of our own story. And the story that takes place in game environments is actually different for every player. So maybe we'll get into that here in a minute. I appreciate the fact that everybody has stuck it out here to the end of Saturday's convention. And I want to apologize to all of you, because where we're going to go here could get pretty sticky and pretty deep. And if you can stay awake through this, hats off to you.
Tracy, I'm so excited. Now, do you have a presentation?
Let me see if I have a presentation, because if I have a presentation, this is the way that would be the easiest to do it. Let's try that.
There we go. I'm going to add that to the stage. And Tracy, I'm going to take myself down for now. You need me, you just shout, yeah?
I certainly will. It is a comfort to me to know that you are actually still out there.
I'm right there listening to every single word. Tracy Hickman, thank you so much.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, everybody, also for attending this seminar today. Characters are so important to our storytelling. I mean, it is through their eyes, of course, that we see story in terms of books and movies. But they're also our own eyes in many ways when it comes to the games that we play, and especially role-playing games. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about here is going to be, it might go down difficult for you. I know that the first time that I explained this particular theory to my wife, she thought it was ridiculous. It was foolish. It was far too systemic for the way story actually should work, and refused to believe it until we started working with it, and finally she had to come around to it. What I'm going to present for you here today are some new concepts, and there's an awful lot of them, and so we have to put a lot of it into this. And so this is going to be very much a fire hose course. The great thing, of course, about World Anvil is you'll be able to come back and review this course and this particular seminar and start picking apart the different pieces as we go along. And I'm curious as if people can respond here, Janet, as I'm speaking, and if they have questions, if they can ask questions. So, excuse me, I got to push it over.
I beg your pardon. I'll get those questions popped up as and when they come up, if you would like that, Tracy.
That would be peachy. I may even ask for some responses from time to time. So let's go ahead and talk about this idea of the usual suspects, or in this case, the unusual suspects, because you want characters that are interesting, that are fascinating, that take us places that we haven't gone before. One of the things I think that's going to be very important, actually, is to give you this. Oh, I hate that when this happens. Excuse me. Oh, I'm just one moment. This is all of this is my fault. Isn't that horrible? And it's only coming up for a minute, and that's because it's just horribly done. I'm going to give you this rule instead of showing it to you, and you can go back and freeze frame, I guess, when we get to it. But the rule I call the iron pyrite rule, and the iron pyrite rule is every character character is the hero of their own story. If you don't take anything else from this seminar tonight, please take this, write it down. Every character is the hero of their own story. And the reason that is important is because that especially includes villains and evil characters. No one thinks of themselves as being evil. Evil is something that somebody else thinks about you and about the way that you behave. The worst characters that you can think of, if they're to be true to themselves, if they're to be true to the story, they have to believe that they are, in fact, the hero of the story. And that what they are doing is for the best and is completely justified. If your villain doesn't feel that way, you know, I mean, we often think about villains as like this evil character with a big mustache and they twirl a mustache. Truly great characters all believe that they are the hero of the story. And it's the story's perspective to tell us which of those is, in fact, the hero or not. Now, here's where we're going to dive into things. I'm going to talk about the story mind. And the story mind is actually a theory of story that is espoused by the Dramatis theory of story. And it's one that I happen to like as a tool for analyzing story and for analyzing characters. Now, this grand argument story argues that a complete story represents the human mind working through a problem, an argument, examining it from all sides, and then determining those results to be either successful, a triumph, or a failure, a tragedy. And if you think about story in terms of it being an argument, making a complete argument, then we can actually take a look at story in the grand argument as 4 separate journeys. These 4 journeys are as follows. There is the objective journey. And this is the story that is taking place as though it were seen from the outside. It's like you're looking down on a battle from a hilltop or from a distance. This is the objective plot that's going on in the story. Then we have the main character's journey. And this journey is the journey that's seen through the main character's eyes. It's the perspective of the main character through whom we see the story take place. Then we have an impact character's journey. And this impact character is the story that's seen from the perspective of a character that most impacts the main character in their journey. Very often, by the way, this impact character is takes an opposite point of view from the main character. And of these 2 journeys, it can almost universally be said that one of these characters will change and the other one will remain steadfast in their journey, in their beliefs. So one is convinced of the truth of the other. And finally, we have the subjective journey. And this is the journey that takes place between the main character and the impact character. This is the private battle that takes place between them, the argument that takes place between them. And in story, it is almost universally the emotional journey that takes place here. So, how do these 4 journeys look, say, for example, in Star Wars? Okay. Interestingly enough, the objective journey here in Star Wars takes place, is actually given to us in the moment that the film begins with the opening crawl. And we see it. It's a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from the hidden base have won their first victory against the Galactic Empire. This objective journey is this big fight. That's this rebellion that's taking place against the Galactic Empire. That's the overview, the objective journey that we're going to take. The main character's journey, main character says this: there's nothing for me here. I want to learn the Force and become a Jedi like my father. This, of course, is Luke. And Luke is the main character in Star Wars. I think it can, whether we can at another time we will have an argument about episode 4 versus episode 1 versus episode 7. It's okay. For now, we're going to just think about like the first, I can't even say the first 3, the episode 4, 5, and 6. There you go. Okay. Or as Margaret Weiss likes to refer to him, the only real Star Wars. So, this is the main character's journey. He wants to learn the Force, become a Jedi like my father. The impact character's journey: if you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Run, Luke, run. This impact character is the character who offers an opposite argument. And he's always offering a counter argument to the things that Luke says. Yeah, Luke says, I can't go anywhere. I'm in for it as it is. I can't go with you to Alderaan. I got to go back to the Vaporator farm here with my uncle. And Obi-Wan says, you don't have to do that. You can come with me. There's no point in you going back. We get on this at every point in the journey. The Obi-Wan offers a counter argument. Well, with the blast shield down, I can't see anything. That's the point, says Obi-Wan. So finally, we come to the subjective journey, which is the journey that takes place between Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. You must learn the ways of the Force. Use the Force, Luke. Let go. And the Force, finding the Force, connecting with the Force, believing in and trusting in the Force, is the emotional journey that takes place between the main character and the impact character. Now, why is this important to know? It's important to know because it helps us to recognize where the emotional center of our story is. When it comes to games, however, it's also important because each of us thinks of ourselves as a main character. But how many of us as game designers consider the idea of providing an impact character, whether it's an NPC or the place is taken by another PC character, in order to provide that counter argument and to generate and create this subjective journey that is so important to the emotional journey of the story. Now, as fun as that is, now we are going to go to the essential game here of characters and specifically of the unusual suspects. And we're going to take this journey together. And we're going to take this journey, we're going to take this journey through some examples, I think, that should speak to all of us. When we talk about characters, then, there are 4 basic character archetypes. There are 8 basic character archetypes. In the dramatic theory of story, these are the 8 types of characters that exist. We have a protagonist, a contagonist, which is an interesting character type. The contagonist is the character that has their own agenda. They're often thought of as like the Loki character or the mischievous character, the character who has their own plan and who is trying to manipulate everything else so that their personal plan will take place. Then we have the guardian, and this guardian character watches over the protagonist and performs the function of being a protector. And in story, this guardian character is always a weak character in some way. Otherwise, the guardian would simply fix the problem for the protagonist and we would have no story. So this guardian then is the protector then, and acts as the protector in this structure. Then we have the antagonist. The antagonist is the villain, the bad guy, although it doesn't always have to be a person. This antagonist can be a force. It can be like nature as an antagonist. A disaster movie, the antagonist may be like an earthquake or a volcano erupting. Okay, or it can even be a social force, a political force, or national force. But the antagonist is the bad force that's working against the protagonist. Then we have 4 other characters here below this. We have the skeptic character. The skeptic character is the one who argues against stuff. They are literally skeptical. They don't believe things. Faith is not in their wheelhouse. Bad things are always going to happen. It's better to be cynical. We have the reason character. I mean, if we were talking Star Trek, it'd be Mr. Spock. The reason character is the character who always thinks in logical terms and wants to reason through problems and dilemmas. We have the emotional character who deals with their feelings. Again, if we were talking Star Trek, this is Dr. McCoy, who's, damn it, Spock, don't you feel anything? This is the essence of Dr. McCoy. The emotional character is all about feelings and coming to conclusions emotionally. And then finally, we have the sidekick character. And this sidekick character is a fascinating character too. The sidekick character represents faith and support. You can do it, buddy, and encouragement of the course of action that's being taken. These are the 8 character archetypes. What is fascinating to me is that every film that you go to, you will find these 8 archetypes represented in some form. You can almost go to a movie, and my wife and I have actually done this. Often we'll do this. We will go to a movie and we'll come out of the movie. We make a point of doing this after we get in the car so nobody hears this bizarre thing that we do. But we will then dissect the film and find the archetypes in the movie. And just about any film that you can see or that you can watch or even think of will have an array of these 8 characters. Very often you'll see the main characters as being 8 characters. Now, that was very difficult for my wife to accept, by the way, until we started playing this game. You can play it too. Next time you watch a film, or even pop one in sometime when you're not here at the World Building Convention, pop one in and see if the main characters don't sort themselves, or at the very minimum, are represented by 8 separate characters. Now, these 8 characters are divided into 2 groups of 4. The first group are called driver characters, and driver characters directly influence the course of the objective story. They drive it forward. They make it move along. The second 4 are passenger characters. And these passenger characters are dragged along by the events of the objective story. They don't make it go forward, but they are affected by and pulled along the objective story by the events that are outside of their control. Driver characters have influence on the objective story. Passenger characters do not. Now, and if you thought it was fun so far, these each one of these characters has two characteristics that are associated with them: action characteristics and decision characteristics. Action characteristics are the way that they affect what's going on. They are the channel of action that takes place. The decision characteristics, on the other hand, are how they come to conclusions. It's their internal thinking and their internal motivations, as opposed to actions, which are the things that they do. This is where we can get into complex and interesting and unusual characters. So let's explore this just a little bit. I mean, this is the map. Let's take a look at the territory, if we can, for just a moment. These are the associated characteristics with each of the action and decision elements for the characters. Protagonists, as you can see here, their action is to pursue. They will pursue a course of action. They will move forward the course of action, and they have an objective in mind, and they're going to get to that and do it. They also have a decision characteristic of consider, and that means that when they're confronted with a problem, they will deal internally. They will deal with it by considering it, and considering a conclusion to the problem. Contagonists, this temptress kind of character, okay, or temptor kind of character, their motivation is to hinder. They want to stop something or they don't want to stop something, but they want to hinder it. They prevent stumbling blocks or influence the course of action into a different direction. And their decision is temptation. Temptation is the means by which they are considering how to hinder things. They want to tempt characters to go in a different direction. Guardians are there to help. That's how they act, is they try to help. And their decision is conscience. The inner self, what is right and what is wrong internally. Antagonists want to create avoidance. They want to prevent the protagonist in their pursuit. And they want to do it by influencing them to reconsider their course of action. Then we move down to the passenger characters. And again, the passenger characters don't affect the overall story course, but they do have means of acting and deciding things. Skeptics are always against whatever it is that everybody else wants to do. They want to oppose what that is. And their internal thinking about all of this is to disbelieve anything. Characters that represent reason are all about acting to control things because of the decision of logic. Logic dictates that everything must be controlled. Emotion, on the other hand, is uncontrolled. The emotion is free and follows its own course, and the feelings of the heart, the whims of the heart. And its decision making is about feeling. Does it feel right? Does it feel like this is the right thing to do? And finally, sidekick, whose action is to support people and other characters, and does so in the decision process of belief, faith, trust. This means that every character, whether it's a protagonist, a contagonist, a skeptic, a sidekick, each one of these has an action characteristic and a decision characteristic. In the most basic form, then, we see that they have predetermined relationships the way they're presented here to you. Antagonists, as we can see by the yellow arrows, antagonists are in opposition to protagonists and represent the opposite argument to the protagonist. Guardians are opposite contagonists. Guardians are trying to protect the protagonist from being influenced away from their course. Excuse me. On the other hand, the blue arrows represent a relationship. There's a relationship between the contagonists and the antagonist. There's a relationship between the contagonist and the protagonist. And the nature of that relationship can be supportive, but it can also be argumentative. And this relationship is true for each of these four groups. Protagonists against antagonists, skeptics against sidekick, which I think you can see, reason, opposite emotion. Wow, I know, so far this is a lot to think about. But at the same time, it gives us a really great handle on looking at our characters in our novels as well as our characters in our games and world structures. So, why don't we take a look at something fairly basic? Let's take a look at episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars. So, quick question then. Who is the protagonist in those three films? I know I should probably sing the Jeopardy theme at this point.
I'm waiting for the chat to catch up on this one because
there must be a lot of chatting going on.
Like, there we go. We have it. Luke Skywalker. Luke. It's Luke.
Yes,
everybody.
It is Luke.
He's our
Luke is the protagonist. And Luke pursues a course of action and considers the Force and his role in it. Who is the Guardian? This has got to be something.
I think we've touched on him already. Let's see what the chap has.
I think we may have touched on him already.
There we go. Straight in there with that mom friend talks.
Yes,
Obi-Wan.
that mom friend talks. Yeah. Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan is the Guardian. Absolutely. And he's a weak Guardian. I mean, the guy dies halfway through the first movie. How weak can you get? Well, apparently not that weak, because you can come back as a Force ghost or whatever. He represents help. He's trying to help Luke. He's trying to help the rebellion at the same time. Although, interestingly enough, he didn't seem that interested in the rebellion before Luke came along. So he's mostly interested in helping Luke. And as we mentioned before, their journey together as impact character and as main character creates that central story, that central subjective story of exploring the Force and trusting in the Force. Now it's going to get just a little bit trickier. Actually, I'm going to go ahead with a couple of easy ones. Who is the skeptic?
Oh, I think we can get that one, can't we, chat?
Oh, chat, we got to be able to come up with the skeptic, right?
Oh, we've got a vote for Han here as our skeptic.
Why, I believe Han is the skeptic.
There we go. Han Solo, says the chat.
Hokey religions are hokey religions are no. What is the line? Hokey religions are no excuse for they're not as good as blaster at your side. Essentially, is what he says, right? I don't know. He can imagine quite a lot.
Hokey religions and ancient weapons are not a good match for a blaster at your side, kid.
Excellent. Exactly. And yes, I'm sorry, Han shot first. So Han Solo is our skeptic. Here's where it gets kind of fun, though. Who represents reason?
Ooh,
Ooh,
that's an
yes.
interesting question. I have my theories.
I can give you
What
a
do you
clue
think?
if you want a hint. What does the chat say?
We've got a guess of C3PO.
That's very interesting.
Another one for R2D2. Yoda, says Davina.
Yoda.
That would have been my guess too, yeah.
Ah. Well, here I am going to propose something else.
Oh.
They let us escape. How else do you explain the ease of our escape? When we think about Leia, everything she says is reason and logic. Yeah. And it's actually true too later in the second film. You know, Han's making the moves on her and she said, I like nice men. Yeah, that's a reasoned response. I'm sorry. Even though it's Harrison Ford when he's young and is really hot. I'm sorry. That's a reasoned response. And so and if you think about her physical presence, she is very controlled. She's very, as we would used to say when I was much younger, very uptight. And she speaks in terms of reason.
Yeah.
So if she is reason, who is emotion?
Well, we have a picture from the chat. 3PO is very emotional for a droid.
That is quite true. 3PO is very emotional for a droid.
Let's have a look. Where does Chewie fit in is now the question.
Well, I believe that this is where Chewie fits in right here.
Yeah, he's our emotion beam.
He is, I mean, his lines are not particularly memorable. And I can't howl like a Wookiee, but if I could, I would right now. If you think of it, first of all, think about who is opposite Leia. Leia's the one who says, get this moving carpet out of my way. And it's actually true because, you know, what happens, you know, the Wookiee is howling and Han says, oh, get out here, you big baby. I mean, he literally calls him a big baby. And when Luke goes missing in the second film, at the beginning of the second film on his Tauntaun, who is it that's crying about Luke being lost? It's Chewie.
Yeah.
And he is uncontrolled and full of feeling.
Yeah.
Well, that leaves us with 3 here. I'm going to give you a sidekick because it's actually 2 characters represent sidekick, and this, by the way, can happen in stories. Multiple characters can take different characteristics and represent the same position in the story. Okay.
Yeah,
that's quite right, Starkiller. C3PO and R2 both represent side. They're both. Oh, you can do it, Luke. We're here to help you, Luke, and we're all behind you here. And poor R2 even gets like shot at the end of the first movie, just trying to help Luke out. Well, that's everybody except for 2, the antagonist and the contagonist.
I'm very excited about this. There were a lot of questions in chat about this.
That's right. That's right. And once you understand who fills these positions, it gives you a perspective on the story that you may not have had before. I'd ask, but I'm just so excited about this. Who do you think the antagonist is?
So we have some pictures from the chat again. I don't want to steal their thunder. Theory is antagonist is Vader and the contagonist is the Emperor.
That's a good theory, Moonlight Bard. That's very good theory.
We also have the opposite presented. Emperor is the antagonist and Vader is the contagonist. There's a lot of feeling they fill the roles. We're not quite sure which one might go where. Maybe you can illuminate us, Tracy.
Let me give you a line from the second movie and see if this helps clarify it for you. Join me,
Mm,
and together we'll rule the galaxy as father and son.
interesting.
That is Vader's plan.
Yeah.
And so even though Darth Vader is presented in the first film very much as a classic antagonist, what we discover in the second film is that he is actually, at his heart, a contagonist. He has his own plan. He has his own desires. And he really does want to rule the galaxy as father and son. And he believes in the dark side of the Force so strongly that he wants to bring his family along with him. And that leaves the antagonist as the emperor, or actually, in this case, the entire empire. Luke is at war with the entire empire, the evil galactic empire. And the empire is the thing that is preventing the motion forward of the universe. If you look at Star Wars in this light, then you can see that these driver characters, right? Luke is directly opposite the Empire. He is fighting the Empire. Interestingly enough, not Vader per se. He has to defeat Vader in order to change his mind to fight the Empire, which is what we see in the third film. The contagonist, it being Vader, sits directly opposite Obi-Wan, the Guardian, which means then that they literally are in confrontation. They literally fight each other in the hallway at trying to get, as the Millennium Falcon tries to escape. So this then is the structure, the character structure of Star Wars. And the character structure in Star Wars is a fairly classical structure for characters. It follows fairly classic lines in terms of story. Very often we are tempted to think, by the way, that the protagonist is always the main character of the story, driving the story forward, but that is not always true. If you are at all familiar with Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, the overarching story in To Kill a Mockingbird is the trial that is taking place in this Southern American town, this bigoted town. And that is the objective story that's actually taking place here. But the story's main character is Scout, the daughter of the defense attorney in this trial, who is actually a passenger character. She actually represents reason in this in the story, and she is dragged along by the events of the trial. So main characters don't have to be involved in the action of the story. Main characters can be passengers that are being dragged along by this story and what happens to them in the fallout of what's going on in the story. Now, when we started this seminar, we were talking about, oh my goodness, so much to deal with. When we were talking in this story, these, of course, are how the characters in Star Wars go. But what about something, The Wizard of Oz? And The Wizard of Oz is something that is fairly well known, and it seems simple, but it has characters in there that are very endearing to us and interesting to us, precisely because it doesn't follow the formula exactly. So here are our 8 characters, and in their 2 action and decision groups. Let's talk about the main character. Well, this has got to be really easy. This has got to be Dorothy. She pursues and she considers what is going on. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's see. Yes, she does. She both considers and she pursues. So who is the guardian here?
There's a theory that the guardian is Toto.
That's very interesting. I like that. I like that idea. Although I don't know how much of a conscience Toto has, but he does certainly want to help in all things.
I like this idea. How about Glenda the Good Witch? Is Glenda the guardian?
Glenda is the good witch. Glenda is the guardian. She helps Dorothy in her pursuit, and she represents conscience here. There's no place like home. She's the one who is like helping her to come to this conclusion. But it's also interesting that she's kind of a weak character. She never fights the Wicked Witch of the West directly. She just kind of, and you know, maybe she'll make it snow in the field of poppies. That's as far as maybe she'll go. So those look pretty good to me so far. What about support and belief? I'm going to just go ahead and tell you right now. Arf, arf.
Yes, I had figured as much. What does he do? He loves. He is dog.
He's dog. This is what he does. He is born and bred to be supportive and to represent faith and belief. And yes, he is support and belief. So everything so far is pretty good. What about skeptic?
Ooh, we have a character without a heart and a character without a brain.
We have a character without a heart. We have a character without a brain. And we have a character who's lost his courage.
Oh, right, of course. So, where does that leave us? The cowardly lion is the theory here.
The cowardly lion. The cowardly lion. If you listen to what the cowardly lion says, I don't wanna.
Yeah.
I don't want to go. I don't want to attack the castle. He's always whining about what he and dragging his feet in disbelief. Although he doesn't want to say, "But I do believe in spooks. I do believe in spooks. I do believe in spooks." But he doesn't believe. So this is the lion. He represents opposing things and disbelieving things. Although eventually he has to come to the idea that the wizard will actually help him. Well, those are pretty straightforward, but it still leaves us with 4 characters that don't quite fit. Now, we might think of the Wicked Witch. We might think of the Wicked Witch as hindering, right? She does try to stop Dorothy from doing stuff, and she is certainly opposite Glenda here. But temptation isn't really her thing. And here's where we find an interesting coupling, an interesting pairing of characteristics. We've also got, these are all of the characteristics that are kind of missing in here. But if we look at hinder as Wicked Witch, which she certainly does, then we can also look at temptation. No, it's not a good match. But if we put the Wicked Witch here, avoid, prevent, like this, then we actually have a pretty good vision of the Wicked Witch as it's portrayed. The Wicked Witch is trying to hinder Dorothy in what she's doing, but she's also trying to avoid and prevent. The Wicked Witch, in other words, is all about action. There's not a lot of thought that goes into what the Wicked Witch does here. She just wants to stop this kid. If that's the case, then, well, what do we do with the wizard? Well, he certainly is reconsider. He tries to talk them out of stuff, and he in his thinking is, maybe you should just stay here. Or better yet, maybe you should go, if you went and got the broom from the Wicked Witch, then the wizard is all about thinking.
Yeah.
He doesn't ever actually really do anything. And the most he does is get in the balloon. But mostly he hides behind the curtain and just thinks up ways to manipulate other people to do what he wants. So in this structure, then, the wizard, we have these fairly traditional character relationships. But in these cases, one character is all about action and one character is all about thought and decisions. Interestingly enough, that because all of the characteristics are filled here, the story structure remains solid, the character structure remains solid, and all of the pieces of the argument are represented for either the players or for the
readers and the watchers.
Readers and the watchers. Exactly. So, well, that still leaves us with Scarecrow and Tin Man.
Absolutely.
Well, we've got, interestingly enough, 4 characteristics to deal with here. Uncontrolled, controlled, logic, feeling. So why don't we think about Scarecrow? Scarecrow, who doesn't have a brain, thinks in logical terms all the time. He's the one who comes up with the plans. He's the one who comes up with all of the ideas that they're supposed to, and all of the reasoning. That is done by the Scarecrow. But if you think about the Scarecrow, in particular, for that matter, even the way the Scarecrow moves and the way the Scarecrow dances and the things the Scarecrow does, the Scarecrow isn't controlled at all.
Yeah.
And so this is the relationship that represents the Scarecrow. Logical thinking, but uncontrolled action.
Yeah.
We actually know, I'm sure all of us know people who are like this, who love to reason things and then run off in all directions trying to make them happen. That is the Scarecrow. So who is left then after this interesting relationship? We have one left, the Tin Man.
Love it.
If you think about the Tin Man, he is always weeping about something. He's all about his feelings. He's all about things of the heart. But what happens when he gets emotional?
He rusts.
He literally locks up. He rusts. He becomes more and more tightly controlled and literally cannot act because he is overwhelmed by his feelings. And this is what makes the Tin Man such a fascinating character, because he is not a traditional character, and yet he fulfills all of the roles necessary to make the complete argument in the story. Now, of course, stories are not restricted to these 8 characters. Worlds are populated by far more than 8 characters. But when we're talking about story, these are the characters that make the argument. I live in my home. There are millions of people who live in the city around me, and I cannot ever hope to meet them. I cannot. The best I can do, hope to include in my personal story are those friends who come and impact my life directly, and who fulfill for me elements of my own story. And part of our purpose, I think, in life is for us to touch one another in such a way that we can impact people's lives. Story is not life. Life is a continuum of constantly evolving stories. And one of the things for me that I have come to know in my years of being a writer and experienced life is that the most important thing we can do is to impact the story of somebody else, not necessarily the world, just someone, the person who's in front of us, to become a part of their story, even if it's just for a moment, and to impact their story in a good and positive way. We find, and sometimes in our minds, I think we shape the people around us into archetypes, because as humans, we naturally think in terms of story. Story, the structure of story, is universal to mankind. It is literally how we think. It is how we take in all of the chaos that is around us and formulate it into meaning. And these structures of basic character archetypes help us in our own perception of the world, the chaotic and crazy world that's around us, in formulating meaning. In your stories, in film, and in your games, these basic archetypes and their relationships can provide for you the means of making your argument to your audience, to your players, and in many ways to each other. After all, as I said before, and apparently am unable somehow to make it stay on the screen, because what's the matter with me? Because I've obviously done this wrong. Every character believes that they're the hero of their story. Every character believes that they are the good guy. You can be the good guy too, by creating characters that make the complete argument for you. So I guess that's as good as I've done. I've left an entire minute for questions.
An entire minute. Oh my goodness,
I
Tracy.
told you there was a
wonderful.
lot to go into this, and I just, oh my goodness,
Tracy, it was spectacular. People are touting it as the best item of the day in a series of incredible items. R.A. Salvatore, Bob sends his love, by the way.
Oh yes, yes. Bobby and I are the best of friends.
He is very wonderful. The chat is all capitals. That was so good. Thank you, Tracy. I loved it. That was amazing. Thank you. And I cannot say it in better words, Tracy. That was simply wonderful. Do you have any sort of final advice on approaching this as maybe a younger writer? Sort of, approaching these concepts for the first time?
Well, my advice, I have two pieces of advice for younger writers. First of all, if any of this is of use to you, use it. If parts of it are not of use to you, don't worry about it. Let go and just go ahead and use what is helpful to you. You may come back to it later and use it, maybe not. But I think that so yes, use what is helpful to you, I think, is my best advice in all of this. go ahead and review it and find those parts of it that have meaning for you and the work that you're doing. Play the game, go to a movie, watch a film, read a book, and see if you can't pull out those 8 characters and play the game of seeing where they fit in all of this. It's a fun game to play. But the final piece of advice I want to give to new writers, someone asked me the other day when it was that I knew that I had made it as a writer. And I told them honestly, I haven't yet. And the reason for that is every time I sit down to write something, anything, the first thing I tell myself every time is, I have not yet written my best work. Everything that you write, especially as a young writer, there will come a day in the future when you look back on that and say, what was I thinking? This is so bad. Every writer does that. I do that. But the truth is that every first thing you write is going to be bad. That's the point. You have to take that, learn from it, and it's the next thing that you write will be better. And you will not have yet written your best work. But if you keep writing, it will get better. So that's my advice for everybody today.
Tracy Hickman, 60 books in and still getting better every single day.
Still getting better every day.
Tracy, it is such a pleasure, as always, to talk to you. And thank you so much for joining us at World Building Con this year. Yet again, it was just wonderful, mind-blowing. I'm gonna be going back and watching that seminar on VOD. I know a lot of the people in the chat have already been asking, could we get this? Can we see this again, please? Yes, everything will be available afterwards. It will be available on the podcast as well. And we will be releasing blogs with some of this information in there as well. So you will be able to find all of this. I will make sure it is accessible for you.
I do have a seminar tomorrow. A panel I think I'm joining tomorrow.
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do.
Tomorrow is another day of wondrous things. We are kicking off with a sci-fi world building essentials panel. So if you've ever wondered about doing sci-fi, but you're not sure where to start, or if you're doing sci-fi, but you're not sure you're focusing on the right things, come and join me and Demetrius tomorrow, and we'll be talking about sci-fi. We'll be sharing all sorts of tips and tricks on how to get around those things that trip us all up. Believe me, they've tripped us up too. That's why we've learned. We'll be going on with planning your world from sentence to setting. Tracy, we'll see you there. I cannot wait to hear more about how you're planning worlds.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'm very excited about doing that. I'm going to be skipping my wife's choir practice to come and do that, actually.
Well, I am honored to hear that. Thank you. After that, we will have beg your pardon, I'm 6.5 hours in now. Monsters and Myths, which is going to be all about creating monsters for our world for exactly the right thing in exactly the right way, or at least as well as we can. And of course, we will be wrapping up Chewing the Fat and all that jazz right at the end with our closing thanks. And Tracy, you'll be joining us for that as well, I believe.
Absolutely.
I am so excited. Guys, there is so much coming tomorrow. Make sure you don't miss it. We will be kicking off just like we did today at 4 p.m. UK time. And yeah, I have that time in other time units as well for you. I'm so sorry. 12 p.m. Eastern time and 4 p.m. UK time. Folks, I will see you all tomorrow. I am so excited for what's to come. I am so grateful for all of our panelists today, for Tracy for that amazing seminar, and of course, for the people you don't see, the amazing Kat and Andy behind the scenes, making sure everything gets where it needs to, all of the information gets to the people who need it. Folks, you have a great one. You know what to do. Until tomorrow, grab your hammer and go world build.